Hello. I stopped watching Doctor Who quite a while ago. I wasn't actually thinking why at the time. I sort of assumed it was because I'd seen all the plots before. You know, Doctor Who and a companion land on a planet. They find a bad situation. They spend a while running down corridors or tunnels. They resolve the bad situation and then they go back into the TARDIS, which then makes that klaxon sound, and we're done. I mean, there's only so many times that can happen before you get bored. Did you know, by the way, that originally Doctor Who was devised by a BBC who, at the time, this was in the 60s, actually took their public service remit seriously and wanted to make a TV show that would engage kids and teach them history. So the first season of Doctor Who was set in various times in Britain's past. Even after they started going more for the adventure and less for the history, there was still some history there, and it was still mostly set in various historical times on the British Isles. But now it's all different. It's the future, it's different planets, it's alternative universes, and that's because you can't reasonably show too many black people in representations of episodes of British history. On account of there not being all that many black people in Britain between the times that the Romans left and the 18th century. And I'm not saying there were none, that's not true either. There were, especially in the ports, but there weren't all that many in British high society. So this poses a bit of a problem for the BBC. That's not to say they couldn't work in a few black people into a historical context. I believe there was one historical episode in the last season of Doctor Who set in segregation era United States. I didn't see it, but apparently it was dreadful. And it turned every white American into some sort of Klan monster. As I said, I didn't see it, but I did see that it went down like a lead balloon in the United States, much to the surprise of the BBC, which as a company sells huge amounts of its product to the States. Like Jeremy Corbyn, who seemed not to be all that well prepared for Trump's rejection of his request for a visit after he had deliberately stayed away from a state dinner because Trump was going to be there, and then attacked Trump in a rambling speech to a bunch of his fellow student radicals in Trafalgar Square. And then there's Emily Thornberry, Shadow Minister for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, who had a meeting at the White House cancelled after she referred to Donald Trump as a racist, and then said he was an asteroid of awfulness that has fallen on this world. Miss Thornberry, just a word to the wise. As an old-fashioned Labour radical that you are, I wouldn't talk too much about asteroids. I feel it incumbent upon me to remind you that one of the most famous asteroids we know about is the one which put an end to the dinosaurs. And talking about dinosaurs, let's get back to the BBC. In their Doctor Who depiction of white American evil and cruelty, while at the same time most of the fan base for Doctor Who in America is white American. In that depiction, the BBC seemed to be blissfully unaware of the first rule of marketing strategy, which would go something like: if you want to sell a box of chocolates to anyone, the picture you put on the box is of fluffy bunnies and woodland scenes. You should not include a very fat person injecting himself with insulin. In other words, if you want to sell something to someone, you don't insult them first or second. or any other time actually. And I'm not saying that Jim Crow shouldn't be acknowledged, but telling every white American that they're a bunch of little shits, which is the takeaway that most of the critics identified in that particular show, well, that's not too clever. But unfortunately, it's how the BBC see themselves now. And even though they constantly insult both the intelligence and the racial background of much of their audience here in Britain, they have just requested a return of the licence fee for pensioners after it's been suspended for several years. They say it's because they're running out of money. Quelle surprise. Anyway, this will probably lead to the unedifying spectacle of old people being hauled into court as unwilling or unable to pay for their TV licences. It wouldn't look very nice, but then if the BBC don't report it, who's to know? So, the Labour Party members think they can insult anyone and then expect them to be polite in return. That doesn't work with Donald Trump now, does it? And that goes for the rest of the left. So what I don't understand is why there's all this fuss about the Doctor Who writer, what's his name, Gareth Roberts, and some tweets he made which were the opposite of complimentary to what's called the transgender community. Apparently all transgender people are a community. At least that's what their community spokespeople say, although I think I'm quoting Walter E. Williams, the economist, in this, in saying a community spokesman speaks for no one but himself. But anyway, apparently the transgender community are outraged. They're stunned by his posts in which this spawn of Attila the Hun said that Chelsea Manning and Munro Bergdorf were trannies, which is not a fashionable word now, and that they weren't really women. Mr. Roberts is of the opinion that a human being cannot just slip into and out of his or her biological sex like a raincoat. Susie Day, a children's writer who has had a book serialised on the BBC, has so taken exception to Gareth Roberts' opinions that she has made sure his Doctor Who story, which was to be included in an anthology called Doctor Who, the Target Storybook, and, by the way, Gareth Roberts' story, for your information, is nothing to do with transgenderism. I felt I had to put that one in. Mr. Roberts' story will not be included because of his offensive transphobic tweets. I might give you some additional information here. Mr. Roberts is gay. But those halcyon times when gay men were protected are long gone. The Overton window permits, and having permitted, moves on. Gays are out now, well past the Overton window. It's all transgender now, and the left can't wait to fall over themselves, showing their enthusiasm for an ever-widening circle of offences to protect people from. I have to emphasise those tweets which were made 2 years ago, and which Mr. Roberts says were composed in a spirit of cheerful vulgarity. They had nothing to do with Doctor Who or even with Mr. Roberts' writing generally. And his writing, by the way, has some solid form. He's not only done Doctor Who stories, but he's written TV episodes for Tennant, Smith and Capaldi. Now, perhaps they were all politically correct scripts, because it was around the time of Tennant that I sort of stopped getting interested in Doctor Who. And as I said, I think it was because of the PC attitudes which were being shoehorned into the scripts. And if Mr. Roberts went along with that, this situation could be highly ironic, but then I don't know, so I can't say. What I can say is that obviously he's a very competent writer, and I'm pretty sure that the upcoming anthology will be all the thinner for his deleted contribution. However, it has cleared the way for Susie Day to slip in another previously rejected manuscript, which might be nice for her until, that is, they come for her too. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to donate, click the Subscribe Star link where you can make a one-off payment or set up a regular contribution, or I have a PayPal account at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.